welcome to this webinar. This is the webinar brought to you by Stafford Global and University of Nottingham. And we're going to be talking about the PGCE International this evening. So my name's Dr. Rupert Knight. I'm one of the tutors on the course, and I'm talking to you right now from cold but sunny England. So I'm here at the University of Nottingham. So we're going to talk to you tonight about this course and talk through some of the features of it, some of the advice we can give you if you're thinking of applying. And as you do so, as you're listening, there's an opportunity for you to type in questions. And with the help of a colleague from Stafford Global, I hope I can be past those questions and have a look at them at the end. And if there's anything that we haven't addressed in the general presentation, then I'll do my best to answer questions at the end. And I hope the experience is a useful one. So thank you for attending, and thank you for joining us this evening. Okay, so I'll just briefly mention that this is a course that we bring to you in association with Stafford Global. So Stafford is as it says here, a resource centre for a variety of UK universities and brings you access to different courses or programmes in business, education and so forth. So in terms of your connection with this course, it's going to be your first point of contact. So the academic consultants at Stafford will be helping you through initial queries, applying for the course, and many of those initial admissions and recruitment issues. So do contact them if you have any questions, and if there are things that we can help with or need to help with, then they will pass them on to us. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the course tonight. But before that, I'll give you a bit of an outline about the University of Nottingham and how this course fits into what we do. And then I'm going to talk to you about the PGCEi course and how it's structured and some of the features of it and how to apply for that course. So first of all, talking about the University of Nottingham, many of you may be familiar to some extent with the university or have heard of the university. So it's part of what we call the Russell Group of universities here, which are some of the highly ranked and research-intensive universities in the UK. So it's a university that has a very strong reputation, not only nationally, but internationally, and always appears fairly high in the QS world rankings. It's described as being a global university, partly because of the high number of international students we have, but also because we actually have university campuses overseas. So at the moment in China, Malaysia, there are outposts of the University of Nottingham. They have campuses there. So it's a university that has a reputation for excellence and particularly the international side of things. And then sitting within that, the School of Education has been involved in working with trainee teachers and practicing teachers for some over 100 years now in various forms. And as a subject, education is very highly ranked here at the university. So nationally, this is a department that's ranked currently 3rd for research in education across the whole of the UK, and 8th in terms of education as a subject. So it's a specialism, you could say, of the university. So within a very strong university, this is a subject that is very highly regarded. So what does that mean really? Well, partly it means that the name University of Nottingham has some recognition and credibility in the field of education. So that's good in terms of eventual qualifications. Maybe more importantly though, on your journey through a course like this, you can be assured that you're working with tutors who are close to the latest thinking and the latest research in this field, and also that the materials that you access, which we'll talk a little bit about in a bit, are informed by and in many cases written by some of the leading practitioners in this area. And you'll see things that you can read, you'll see video clips, all sorts of things through this course that really represent the forefront of what's going on in education at the moment. So it's a really good place to be, and although you may feel like you're not physically here in Nottingham with us, we very much see you as part of this sort of family of the School of Education. So if we have a look at the course itself, so the PGCEi stands for Postgraduate Certificate in Education International. So this is a master's level program, and it says it's a program of professional enrichment for educators in countries other than the UK. So I guess first thing to say is this is a course that runs all over the world. So it truly is an international course. We have hubs. We have a hub in the UAE, which is the one we're talking about tonight, but we also have operated in some 20 different countries around the world, in different continents across the world. So you're part of a big family of students who are working on the same course with the same materials in as diverse locations as Africa, South America, across Europe, and so on. And the course has been running for around about 11 years or so. And in that time, thousands and thousands of students have graduated from the course. So it's a well-trodden path and a well-established course. The exciting thing at the moment is just this year, well, in fact, the beginning of this academic year, back in September, we launched our latest update of the course. So every few or several years, we update all the materials on the course, and that has only just happened. So that means that if you join our course quite soon, if you're thinking about the next cohort, for example, you'll be one of the first groups to use the new materials, fully updated, lots of very, very current readings and ideas that really, really bring this up to date. So it's a really good time to be joining the course. So in terms of what the course is setting out to do, it's a master's level program of academic study. So it's really important to be aware that this is not offering you a license to teach. It's not offering you anything like a qualified teacher status. So it's not a practical qualification. So we're not going to be coming to see what you do in school. We're not going to be setting you up with a mentor or an assessor in school who does that either. So this is a separate type of course. It's an academic course, and it may be something that enhances your career, and I think past graduates certainly have found that, but it's not something that gives you a piece of paper or a certificate that makes you into a teacher. So it's really important to be aware of that. And in terms of that kind of teaching qualification side of things that people are often interested in, it's really important wherever you're teaching that you find out about what the requirements are. It may be that you need some kind of educational academic course like this, plus some other kind of licensing or some other arrangement. But have a look into that locally where you are and make sure you ask those questions if that's what you're seeking at the moment. So this is a master's level course then. It's academic. The way that it will, however, enrich your practice, if it's not about your practical teaching and assessing your practical teaching, is, I think, primarily by exposing you to a whole range of new ideas in education. So I speak as someone who's worked in the university sector now with teachers for many years, but originally I was a teacher in school. I was a primary teacher, as it happens. So when I was still in school, I did a master's level program myself. I did an MA in education. And in doing that, it absolutely changed my practice. So it opened my eyes to all sorts of new ideas. It made me question things I was doing. And I think all of us can get into a bit of a rut or a bit of a habit, and we just keep perpetuating the same kind of things, or we work in one type of school system, and maybe we take it for granted that that's how things are done, and we're not always aware of other possibilities. And if you ever want to continue your career as an educator, it's really good to have that experience in a more general way of education and some of the big principles that will move with you wherever you teach, wherever in the world and whatever school system, rather than just knowing how it's done in one particular school or one particular type of school. So it's going to give you an awful lot of tools and also an awful lot of challenging thoughts that will help you to move on. We call this a blended learning program. You can see that highlighted in bold here. So what that means is it's a blend of face-to-face teaching, where we actually meet you, and your own online study in between. So what happens is on this course, and I think it's a real strength of what we do here, we have during the year, we have 2 face-to-face workshops with you. So we come out to the UAE. So in March, for example, which is the next time we'll be doing a workshop, and the next time we'll be starting out with a new cohort, I'll be coming out to the UAE along with 4 other colleagues, and we will be having our face-to-face tuition in March in the UAE. We do this always over a weekend, so it'll be a Friday and Saturday in each case. So we're not asking you to come out of your workplace, and we're not making that awkward for you. It's worth noting those workshops are compulsory, however, so you need to make sure that the dates, which are on one of the later slides, are ones that you can make and you will be able to attend, because it's a compulsory part of the course. So at those workshops, we of course get to meet you, which is great. So when we're then working more at a distance in between times, we know exactly who you are and we've met, and I can put a face to the name, and you also know who your tutor is. And it enables us to have a much better working relationship. So at the workshops, the face-to-face workshops, we tend to put you into smallish groups of around about 20 with a tutor. So typically we may have, starting out, we may have anywhere between 70 and 100 people starting in a cohort, but we put you into those smaller tutor groups. So you have a named tutor. So that could be me, for example, or it could be a colleague of mine. And we'll work with you over those 2 days in the workshop to introduce you to the materials and the ways of working, to reassure you about some of the ways that we assess your work and what we're looking for in your work, and to challenge your thinking with some big ideas and thought-provoking things that we know that you're going to encounter. So although partly we want the workshops to be instructive and to help you navigate the course and to understand the course, we also want them to be a really valuable learning experience where you go away full of ideas and buzzing with some excitement about education. The tutors that come out are all experienced education professionals. So in the team that comes with me, for example, usually we have people who've been head teachers, for example, people who've worked as educational advisors, primary specialists, secondary specialists, a whole range of expertise, years and years, decades of expertise each. So we bring all of that to bear. The other thing about the face-to-face meetings that I think is really important and not to be underestimated is that you're also going to meet a whole load of fellow educators. So I already said to you that sometimes there's a danger that we get stuck in thinking about one type of schooling or one school. What you're going to do is be in a group that's mixed. You'll have people in your group who are teaching different age phases. Could be anything from early years, kindergarten, right up to teaching young adults. You're going to be with people who might be teaching in, say, a British curriculum school, or a US curriculum school, or a local government school, or an IB curriculum school, all kinds of systems. So it's really going to broaden your horizons. And in all of the activities and the work we do across those weekends, we make sure that there's lots of opportunity for group discussion, and you'll be able to bring your experiences to bear. So it's actually also a really great professional networking event. And you're going to find yourself with a whole load of new colleagues that you can keep, and the relationships you can sustain for a long time. So those workshops are great, really enjoyable, vibrant, exciting events. We have one right at the start of the course. So within about a week or two of the course beginning, you'll have your first workshop. So that means that we can give you a kind of orientation to everything and get you started in a really strong way. And the second workshop happens about midway through. So by then you've done some of the work, you've done some of your assignments and your assessed work. We can reflect on that. We can give you another layer of input about things to come, and we can make sure the second half of the course proceeds really, really strongly as well. Okay, so the way the course is structured is in 3 compulsory modules. So there are 3 20-credit modules, and these modules are equally weighted. And while you don't have a choice of module because they are compulsory, you have a great deal of choice of what you do within each module. So I'll talk about in a moment about what's covered here. But when we talk about this course being a blend, and we talked about a blend in terms of face-to-face and online study, we also think of a blend in a different sense, that every individual student brings their own personal blend of learning. So all of you would bring your own experiences of working in a certain context and the years of experience, or perhaps you're a relative newcomer to education, all of your own education history and that kind of baggage that we all have as learners, which is unique to teachers. If you think about it, we've all sat and watched teachers for years of our lives, and that's not something you can say about going into other professions. So by making lots of personal choices within all of your modules, you get to pick the things that are most relevant to you. And all of our modules are generic, so they cover all age phases, but you can tailor the work you do to the particular setting you work in. So if you are an early years specialist, you can work and tailor your choices and the things you choose to write about or present about in assignments to that setting. If, for instance, you are, in contrast, a secondary maths teacher, then you can tailor everything towards that and make that as relevant as possible for you. So the modules covered here, you can see listed as the second bullet point here. They're designed to take you on a journey in 3 steps. So the first module is all about educational aims and values. So what is education for? And sometimes we don't stop and ask ourselves that question very often. We just go to work and we teach students, and we don't stop and think, what's the aim of this? What's the purpose of this? Is it to get qualifications for these people so that they can have a productive life economically and be comfortable? Or is it actually for the betterment of the country? Is it about educating citizens for the country so that, you know, makes the country a better place? Or is it about educating people to make the world a better place? It's not about money or anything, it's about people who want to make a difference in that way. Or is it actually about each student, each learner as an individual, and following their own interests and making them into the most fulfilled person they can be? And I guess the answer is always going to be some combination of all of those things, but different schools, different school systems have a different point of emphasis. So those kind of big questions are things we're talking about in module 1. What's education for and why? And you'll see it also says in international contexts. So this is a course specifically designed for international educators. And there's a lot of material about what it is to be an international educator. What is an international school, for example? When you stop to think about it, that's harder to define than you might think. And I think one of the big developments in this new version of the course is actually the way that we've enhanced the international side. So there's all sorts of material from all over the world, from different cultures, things that you won't be familiar with necessarily, that will broaden your thinking about that. So having in module 1 talked about what education is for and how that looks in an international context, module 2 is about, therefore, how do learners learn and how do we teach them? So this is all about learning and teaching in international contexts. So you'll look at various theories of learning. Some of them will really resonate with you and you'll feel very comfortable and interested in those. Others you may think are very much against your own personal ethos. Some of them will be very much in keeping with the place you work, and some of them may be very different. And we'll also look at various aspects of teaching practice. So we'll look at things to do with special educational needs, behaviour, getting students to work together collaboratively, all sorts of things, a huge array of topics. And in that module, module 2, you've got a big choice. There are certain compulsory elements, but a huge choice that you can make and select certain focus points and units of work within that module that are most of interest to you. And then the final module is called Inquiring into Educational Practice. So this is the logical next step. If we've thought about what education is for, we've thought about how we deliver that education, ultimately we need to know whether our students have actually understood what we've taught, and how would we know that? So we set you up with a small research project. You pick an aspect of what you do in your role as an educator, and you do a small piece of field work, gather some data in a very small scale way, and find out about what your students understand about something that they've been taught. So the focus is on students' understanding of concepts, and you will do some research to actually find out more about that, and also to learn how to be an educator that can inquire into their own practice, which is a great skill and mindset to have going forwards. And through all of those modules, a common thread that runs through is that we ask you to be developing your own personal philosophy of education. So you're coming out of this course, we hope, with a certain stance, a certain view that is personal to you about what you stand for, about your principles as an educator, that goes beyond where you work right now, and is something that's very much about you. The third point here talks about the assessment of each module. So each module is assessed with a 4,000 word assignment. However, that's somewhat misleading, because in each case there is a choice. You can do a written assignment, or you can do an alternative assignment which has an equivalent amount of work and effort put into it, which might be in the form of a presentation, for example. The academic criteria that we assess by and the level of understanding and so on is exactly the same, but you're able to present your assignment in a different format, because we want to allow people some flexibility. We want to acknowledge that some people demonstrate understanding better in written forms and others perhaps in a spoken form. So you've got some choice there as well, all part of that personal blend. Quite often people find the idea of the assignments quite daunting, which is understandable. And sometimes people say, well, I've never worked at master's level before, or they say, it's a long time since I studied. I did my bachelor's degree many years ago, and I'm out of touch with that kind of writing, or I studied a different discipline that's very different, or in a different country, and I don't know whether the expectations will be the same. So we give you lots of guidance, particularly at the face-to-face workshop, the first one, about what we're expecting and how. And we also have close work with the tutors on that, particularly that first piece of work. Each of those 3 pieces of work is preceded by you putting together a proposal where you put out a plan of what you want to do and why. So your tutor gets to feedback on that and talk to you about that. And for the first assignment, the module 1 assignment, you get to produce a draft of that and submit that, and your tutor will feedback in great detail about that draft before you then revise that and develop it and submit it for your first assessment. So there's a lot of structure provided and lots of materials online as well that will scaffold you towards that first assignment. So if you are daunted by that, don't be too worried, because it's a normal way to feel, and we work with you very closely on that. So we said that this is a master's level program of study. For some people, the certificate in education, the 1-year course, is what they're looking for, and that's all they're looking for. But it's really important to know that you can use those credits, those 60 credits, remember 3 20-credit modules. You can use your 60 credits towards a master's qualification, a full master's qualification in education. So should you choose to do that, you've got effectively a third of an MA in education. So you've paid for and secured the first third of your MA. We've got some other specialist pathways in MA. You can see here on the screen a mention of things to do with leadership and management and special needs. We also have teaching English as a second or other language. For those specialist routes, you would probably be taking just 30 of your credits in. But for the general MA in education, 60 credits representing a third of the course done. And every year we have students on the MA. I work with some of them myself, who have come through that PGCEi route somewhere in the world and are completing their course and completing their masters with us, which is great to see. So all of the materials you need for the course are part of the package. So we have extensive online materials through our virtual learning environment. That includes readings, it includes audio materials, it includes video materials, and it includes access to our electronic library at the University of Nottingham, where there's access to electronic journals, but also electronic books. So you won't need to buy any books, and you won't need to be near a university library or have access to any of those things. All of that is going to be provided here. Some of the readings, the core readings, are built into the course materials, so everybody will read those things. Other things that are more optional are provided as electronic links in a reading list at the end of each unit of study. And then through the university's electronic library, you can then also do literature searches and search for even more specialist things that might be relating to an assignment that you've chosen to do. You also, of course, have access to your tutor when you're working and we've returned to the UK. So you can make contact with your tutor at any time for support via email, via telephone. If you're able to use a platform like Skype or similar, we can talk to you in a video link as well. And at various points in the course, you'll also be invited to contribute to online forums and discussions where you will actually be sharing ideas about some of the readings and some of the things you've studied with some fellow students there. So in terms of entry requirements, this is a postgraduate course. So that means that the standard entry requirement is that you have your undergraduate, your bachelor's qualification already, at least second class honours there. And there is an English language requirement as well. And of course, you know, the reason for having that and the reason for having that IELTS limit there is because the materials are all in English, and we are expecting you to be operating at a master's level and reading about some fairly complex ideas and then communicating those ideas with a degree of skill. So we want you to feel confident and proficient in your English language building up to that. So if English isn't your first language, if it's not a language that you were educated in, for example, then the IELTS thing will be important for you there. We also say that a requirement is that you are an established educator. So that's a phrase that can mean all sorts of things, isn't it? So what we mean by that is that you are working or you have access to a school setting on a fairly regular basis. This is because the assignments, although we're not assessing what you do in class, as mentioned before, when nobody's coming to see you or judge you or witness your teaching, the assignments will all be in different ways asking you to comment on particular educational settings and practices. In the first module, you might be talking about the kind of general school system that you work in. In the second module, you'd be talking about the kind of lessons that you teach and things that you have actually taught. And in the third module, you would be perhaps, for example, interviewing or observing a group of students that you work with in order to gather some data for that inquiry project. So in all sorts of different ways, the modules require you to have that connection to practice. Occasionally we have people who are not working in school, so lots of people are already teachers in school, lots of people are teaching assistants or learning support assistants, but sometimes people are just embarking on their career and they maybe are volunteering in school. That is absolutely fine, as long as you're confident that you have access to the classroom at times when you need it and you would be allowed to work with some students. It also says here that non-standard applications are considered on a case-by-case basis. So I've outlined to you, for example, the bachelor's degree requirement. If you didn't have a bachelor's degree, but perhaps you had really extensive professional experience as an educator over a number of years and maybe other equivalent qualifications, then those are the sort of exceptional cases that we might look at. So if you are somebody who falls into that category, my advice would be, first of all, to talk to your academic consultant at Stafford, and they will know the kinds of profiles that have been successful before in a non-standard way. And they will then, if they think that you do potentially fit that, they will then encourage you to apply, and we will have a look at that on a case-by-case basis. So your academic consultants can talk you through a lot of the application ideas and how to go about that. And you can see here some of the things that you're going to need. One of them is, of course, a personal statement. So do make sure that you show in there what your motivation is for this course, what it is that you're hoping to get out of this, how it's going to enhance your career, what you're interested in. Think about also telling us about your professional educational background, of course, and your current role and those kind of things, but also any transferable skills. We have lots of people on this course who at some point have or are shifting careers. We've had people who've worked in legal profession and various aspects of business and all sorts of other backgrounds. And that's great. And all of those people bring lots and lots of transferable skills to do with communication, time management, and so on. So make sure you talk about those things as well. And you will need to have a reference. So again, thinking about what we've said about what we're looking for on the course and the kind of things you're doing on the course, see if you can find someone to write a reference who will be able to comment on those kinds of things. They'll be able to comment on you as an educator, but also your capacity to manage your time and to study for master's level qualification. So we have 2 intakes each year in the UAE. This varies around the world, but for this particular region, 2 intakes per year. We start one group off every October. So we have a group that started last October who are currently working away on their studies. And we also start a group off in March every year. So therefore, you've got 2 chances, 2 dates when you can consider doing this. I expect most people who are with us tonight are thinking about doing this with the next cohort. If you are, then the next cohort is going to be starting in March, which is actually, of course, not very far away now. All of a sudden, it will become March. The program will commence on the 1st of March. And there are limited places on each of these cohorts. We have a ceiling on the numbers because we need to keep that good ratio of tutors and students in each case. So if you are considering applying, and especially if you're considering applying for March, really think about this fairly swiftly, talk to people at Stafford and get your application in as soon as you can. For that cohort in March, you can see here the workshop dates. So remember I said that these are compulsory workshops, and so you need to be clear that you can attend both of those weekends. As you can see, I said to you earlier that the first workshop is right near the start of the course. So the course will begin on March the 1st. That's when you'll have access to the materials and you can begin your work. But you can see there within the first couple of weeks, you're meeting your tutors and having that first face-to-face opportunity. And then your second workshop will be in early October when you're about midway through your course. All of the fees are handled by Stafford and you'll be paying those to Stafford. So you can see there some of the figures and you can talk to the academic consultants about the payment systems and how that works. Okay, so I've gone through a number of things. I hope that's useful. What I'm going to do is have a look at some of the questions that have come through, and I hope that in doing this, even if we're clustering together similar things, that we can answer some of the things you're interested in. So bear with me while I have a look and see what kind of things we have here. Let's have a look. So I've got a question about whether it's mandatory to have a job while doing the course. So probably you'll feel that question's been answered now since this was sent in. So just to reiterate, you need to have access to a classroom and regular access and be able to work with students. But if you're doing that on a voluntary basis, then that is acceptable for the course. So another question here, let me read this one. Do I have to travel to the UK or any other designated centre, or can I do things completely online? So you don't have to travel to the UK, so that's one thing to say. Although at the end of the course, when you graduate, if you choose to, you can come to graduation ceremony in England, and it's always really great to see people from the PGCEi who come over. One of my students came over from my last group, for example, to the last graduation, and it was really, really good to see her. So you certainly are very welcome for graduation if you're able to come over for that. But you don't travel to the UK for the course. What you do need to do, though, is be able to come to those 2 workshops in the UAE. So currently those are held at a really top quality venue in Ajman. So, you know, we've tried various different places, and this is a venue that really works well. It has the best facilities we've come across. So that's where the workshops are currently. So you do need to be able to travel there. Most of the time, though, of course, in between, apart from those 2 weekends, your study will be online. My school wants me to complete the programme in less than 12 months. Is this possible? So we talk about this as being a 12-month programme. Effectively, your actual time working is more like about 10 months of study. So really, it is a little quicker than that already. When we talk about 12 months, that includes the time for us processing the marks at the end and getting right through to a sort of graduation time. So really, you're talking about sort of 10 months of study. Usually we find that pretty much everybody needs that length of time to complete the course. In theory, though, it would be possible to accelerate. What we would normally say is that you complete module 1, you see how you get on with that, and at that point, if you wanted to talk to your tutor and negotiate to give things in a little sooner and to work a bit more quickly, you could do that. But we recommend that you work on module 1 first. The other thing to bear in mind is even if you complete all of the work earlier, the graduation and your official award, because this has to link into the University of Nottingham and the tens of thousands of students across courses and the way things work here, there are only certain times of the year where results are officially processed and graduation takes place. So it may be that you finish the course a little bit sooner, but your graduation might not necessarily be sooner. Your award might not necessarily be sooner. It depends when the next opportunity falls. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, this is a good question. Will my degree, certificate and transcript state online learning? No, the award that you get doesn't say online learning. We know that in some cases, some employers might have certain preconceptions about online learning and look at maybe less favorably. It doesn't say that. And in any case, we would always argue that this is what we've called a blended learning course. So it isn't entirely online learning, but the award doesn't state that either way. Got a question here saying, can I teach in the UK after completing this qualification? So this goes back to what I said before about this not being a license to teach. So in the UK, in the state sector, the usual qualification people have is qualified teacher status, or QTS, and this course does not award that. So if you wanted to teach in the state sector, in most cases, you would need to gain QTS separately from this course. And the usual route to do that is called an assessment only route to QTS. So you could look this up if you're interested and just simply Google assessment only QTS. And you'll see the government has a website that talks about how that works. We're working at the moment to try and make some closer links with that process and give our students some good advice about how to move on to those kind of routes. So we will be able to talk to you and advise you about ways that you can do that. But it's important to be clear, it's not part of the course. To go back to the original question about whether you can teach in the UK, however, it's worth bearing in mind that the private school sector here, while they very often will want somebody with QTS, they don't have to insist on QTS. And there are some other categories of state school who have freedoms about qualifications and recruitment. So there are ways of teaching in the UK without that qualification, but just be clear that QTS is not part of the course. Let's see what else we have here. So a question about what will be covered in the face-to-face meetings. So I've touched on some of this, but just to recap briefly, we're trying to do a number of things. We're trying to introduce ourselves to you as tutors so that you have somebody approachable who you've met, and we're trying to introduce you to your fellow students so you have a network of other professionals around you, both for support during the course, but also for wider professional networking. We're trying to introduce you to the modules of the course and give you a kind of navigation orientation feel for what's going on. We're trying to introduce you to some of the big ideas around the topics that I've mentioned that are covered. So we get you to do activities and discuss things and explore your thinking. Part of that, developing personal philosophy that I mentioned. And we're also making you clear about what we're looking for in the assessed work. So we'll have a look at some examples of previous students' writing. We'll look at the assessment criteria, and we'll make sure that you know what constitutes a good piece of work. What does it look like? So I think all of those things, and we have a really packed weekend each time, and it's a really enjoyable experience certainly for us as tutors, and I think for all the students as well. Okay, so a graduation related question. What will happen if I cannot attend graduation in the UK? How do I get my certificate? So while I said that you are very welcome to come to graduation in the UK, and it would be lovely to see you, it's not, of course, it's not a compulsory thing. We know that most people are not going to be able to do that. Although the ceremonies do happen in July and just before Christmas, so they will fall into your school holidays. What happens is you just indicate a choice when you're prompted to at a certain point in the course, which is to graduate, as we call it, in absentia, which means in your absence. So it just means that at that point, your graduation would be passed and you will be sent your certificate. So that will be sent out to you. So that's not a problem, and that's how things work for most people. Okay, right. So a question here. If I fail an assignment, do tutors advise where I've gone wrong, and am I permitted to resubmit? So if you're unsuccessful and you fail an assignment, yes, your tutors will give you really detailed feedback. So we give you detailed feedback on all of your assignments anyway. We identify the things that have gone well, but of course advise you on ways to improve. So we're very big on that. It's a big part of what we do. If you have failed the assignment, we will be especially careful about the feedback we give. We will give you very clear pointers as to what you need to change in order to pass. And we will also offer you some kind of either Skype or telephone tutorial so that you can also talk to your tutor and ask questions and make sure you've understood exactly what you do. And then, yes, you will have a chance to resubmit. The resubmission is not an immediate thing. Usually you have something like 6 weeks before you need to resubmit. So this is something that happens occasionally, and we've got some very supportive structures in place for people in that position. Okay, any more questions? Let me see. So there's a question about whether the online certificate has the same value as a campus one. That's very difficult to answer. It depends who is looking at it. As we've already mentioned, the certificate you get will not say online study or distance learning or anything like that. So in that sense, it's not going to be front and center and obvious in that way. I think the only thing I would say perhaps is just to be clear that for students in England and Wales, when we talk about a PGCE, that is something that is known to be a teacher qualification, and it includes a license to teach. It includes qualified teacher status. So sometimes people misinterpret PGCEi and think this is the same. And as we've already said, I hope fairly clearly, this isn't giving you that license to teach. So I think as long as people are clear about that and they're clear about what it is, that ought to be fine. And this is a master's level certificate. It is working at master's level and is every bit as rigorous whether you do things online or face to face. So I would say, given all of that, the value certainly ought to be the same. So a question saying, I have professional qualifications in education, but no bachelor degree, and would I be accepted? So this falls into the category of non-standard applications. So the answer is, it depends, and it's something we need to look at. But in that sort of case, if you've got a fair bit of experience as an educator and some other qualifications, I certainly think, you know, initially speak to your academic consultant at Stafford, and then you'd probably be advised to send your application in, and we'll have a look at that. So it may be that you could be accepted onto the course, but we'd need to have a look at that particular case. Okay, let's have a look and see if we have other questions. Yeah, this is a common and understandable question about the average number of hours that you might spend in a week on this kind of course. So, of course, there isn't a set figure. People work in different ways, at different speeds, and have different working patterns and habits. What we would say generally, I guess a rule of thumb might be 12 or so hours. To think about that in a week would be approximately the right amount. For some people, that's doing a little bit each evening and chipping away at it, a couple of hours a night, something like that. For others, it's thinking, well, my work commitments, my family commitments wouldn't allow that, but I could just take an entire day and do a really long stint on, you know, on a Friday or Saturday, perhaps if that's your weekend, and work in that way. But that gives you a rough figure, I think. People often ask about how feasible this is. If you're working full time, is it something that is achievable? And the answer is that, of course, it's a challenge for people to adjust to that workload, but certainly it's achievable. And I think the majority of our students each year are people who are also working full time. And every year we try and bring back a past student to talk to the new cohorts. And often that's the thing they're talking about with their words of experience. They're saying, I wondered if I could manage to do this, and I have. And I think if you're enthusiastic and if you're interested in something, then it becomes a labor of love, and you perhaps don't mind putting the time into things. So if you've got the right motivation, I think that's very doable. Okay. So a question here about, you know, I've completed a degree in English from a Kuwaiti university, and would I still need to do the IELTS test? If you just go through the Stafford academic consultants initially, they will liaise with the university here, and the university has a list of universities worldwide where the English language teaching is recognised. So if your university is an institution where that's recognised as an English language university, and therefore you've been educated at university level in English, then you might be exempt from IELTS, but you would just need to get that checked out. So I understand the workshops are compulsory. In the event I can't attend, will I be kicked out of the programme? So we don't want to be kicking people out of the programme, for sure. The first thing to say is, if you already know that those dates will be problematic, then it's important to defer your entry and go for the next available cohort. If you come to the first workshop, for example, and then something happens, something exceptional happens in life, and you get midway through the course and you're getting ready for the second workshop, and you're not able to attend because of some very drastic, unforeseen event that you just cannot get around, then there will be procedures in place where you have to provide evidence for that. So it is a compulsory part of the course. It's built in as an assessment requirement that you come along. But you would have to go through the university's procedures of providing evidence to demonstrate how there's some kind of event that has absolutely prevented you from coming, and it was unforeseeable and unavoidable. And if you're able to provide that evidence, then, and it's approved by the university panel, then we would work with you to try and to ensure that you could continue the course. But it's important to think of those as being quite exceptional events. Yeah, this is a good question. Can I stop my studies for a short time and then resume? If so, what's the maximum duration permitted to complete the program? So yeah, we do have a system where you can pause your studies. We call it a VIS, which stands for voluntary interruption of studies. And with no penalty at all, so no financial penalty or no academic penalty to your outcomes, you can pause the course if you have a good reason. And we're very open and tolerant about that. It doesn't have to be something where you provide lots and lots of evidence or something, but if circumstances are preventing you from working on the course, you can just talk to your tutor, fill in the appropriate paperwork, and pause your studies. Some people do that for a month, 2 months. Sometimes people do that for a whole year. And that is something that's okay to do. And in every cohort, you know, typically we might have a couple of people who have to do that at some point. The question about the maximum period is that there's a very strict rule which we can't get around, which is that there's a 3-year registration period. So if it's a 1-year course, more or less, if you, for instance, stopped and paused for a year, that's still okay because you're going to complete in 2 years. But if you stopped for 2 years, then that's not okay. So 3 years is the maximum time, but yes, you can suspend your studies. Can I apply if I haven't got my IELTS result yet? I don't work in admissions myself, but I believe that you can, and that your offer would be conditional on the IELTS outcome. Just check with your academic consultants at Stafford, but I think you would be offered a place conditional on getting that outcome. A question saying, besides the 3 modules, do we also do a dissertation? So no, you just study these 3 modules. If you then carried on and wanted to do the full MA in education, which by the way, you can study face-to-face here in Nottingham or entirely online, so you could do that easily from where you are. If you carried on and did the MA, you would typically do a couple of modules across 1 year, part-time, and then your final year would be a dissertation. And so you would do a 15,000 word dissertation for the MA. So that is something which is a really interesting thing to do and to look into an aspect of education in great depth. And it's part of the MA, but it's not part of the PGCEi. Is attending graduation mandatory? No, it's something you're very welcome to do, but most people graduate in their absence, and we can send you out your certificate. As this is equivalent to masters, do I still need a master's in education degree? Well, in terms of whether you need a master's in education degree, I can't answer that question because that will depend on what you need it for. So I'm not sure what exactly that's leading towards. In terms of this being equivalent to a master's, this is the same level as master's, and you're operating exactly at that level like our MA education students, but you're only doing the first third, the first 60 credits out of 180 of a master's. So it's equivalent level, but it's only a third of what would build up to be a master's degree. Okay. It looks like we've come to the end of our questions there. I want to really thank you for coming to the webinar and giving your time and listening, and particularly thank you for those of you who've sent in questions. I hope what you've heard is informative. I hope it's useful, and I hope that you feel inspired to embark on the course. And it'd be lovely to see some of you in the UAE working on some of the workshops, and maybe we get to meet face to face. So if you have further questions, please do contact Stafford in the first instance, and good luck with everything, and I hope to see some of you in the future. So thank you very much, and good night.